great to be joined by Raheem Palmer. Does great work over at The Ringer. Has joined me in studio a few times, and he's still out here in lovely Las Vegas. And Raheem, it is always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
It's always an honor to be here. We're having a great NFL week 3. I mean, look, we close it out right, so I can't complain. Life is good.
Absolutely. I know that you've been heavily invested in the NFC East, and I'm sure that you'd love to see what we've gotten right now. A little bit surprising, in my opinion, that the Cowboys have been able to run off 2 straight games. That's going to be beneficial for them moving forward because Dak Prescott is going to be able to come back at some point. But I think that we both be in agreement. The Philadelphia Eagles right now look like the class of this division, and right now, Oddsboard has them as the top team in the NFC. Do you agree with them being the top team in terms of the NFC? Because I take a look at them, and I really can't find a lot of weaknesses, and I do think that you still have to consider teams like the Green Bay Packers, but I've been thoroughly impressed by this team through 3 weeks.
Yeah, I do think that the Philadelphia Eagles are the forefront of the NFC, but I'm going to be honest with you. The Cowboys, to me, they're a team who I took their under 10.5 wins. I think you have to upgrade them because I think their defense is for real. When you look at Micah Parsons, when you look at DeMarcus Lawrence, you look at that defense, they can rush the passer. And I think that under isn't a lock anymore. The way Cooper Rush is playing, now I know they just played the Giants who didn't really have a pass rush, but this team is going to be able to slow you down defensively. They're going to be able to run the ball. I don't think you can count out the Cowboys for the NFC East.
And I do think that with just how you were taking a look at the season in general, it is very important to have an open mindset because you always try to take a look forward when it comes to season win totals. And one game that I'm sure many people thought was going to be a cakewalk, and I still think that the Eagles should be able to get the job done outright, but this Jacksonville Jaguars game is very intriguing because you've got Peterson, who's going to be returning to Philadelphia. As we know, Mr. Doug Peterson would love absolutely nothing more than to get a win in this spot and be able to put Trevor Lawrence even further on the map after his big week last week. And then with the Philadelphia Eagles, certainly they look like the better team right now, but I think when it comes to just season wins in general and just taking a look at the NFL schedule, you have to be very malleable with it because just a few weeks ago, we thought that the Jaguars game was going to be a cakewalk. Not so much anymore, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I think the thing with the Jaguars is, to me, I think a lot of guys, a lot of the sharper players, they took flyers on the Jaguars to win the AFC South. I mean, we were down on the Titans. When you look at the Colts right now, Matt Ryan looks like he's Larry Holmes status at the end of his career. So, I mean, I think the Jaguars have been fortunate this year. Obviously, you play a Colts team who had all those injuries, you didn't have Michael Pittman. You didn't have Alex Pierce. You didn't have Shaq Leonard. They played them at the right time. Then you play the Chargers, who has Justin Herbert coming off a rib injury, and then they lose their left tackle in the game. So I just think they found themselves in fortunate situations, but there is sharp money on the Jags, pushing that line from 7 down to 6. I'm probably not going to get involved here. I'm going to be honest with you. I just think the Jaguars have been so fortunate, so I don't really like the spot to buy the Jaguars.
Yep, they did get a good spot with having Justin Herbert in the fold, but playing very, very injured. And in my opinion, he should have been out of the fold. And when it comes to the Chargers, they're a team that on paper and on paper alone, I had them as a top 4 team in the NFL. But my question coming into the year was Brandon Staley and his coaching. And though he hasn't been going for it on 4th and 5 in his own territory or anything like that, I'm very concerned they left Justin Herbert in the game a few days ago because that could have been something very serious. It doesn't sound like anything happened due to him staying out there in the 4th quarter, but I just take a look at Brandon Staley, and I still don't have any confidence that he's going to be able to lead this team forward. And with the Chargers dealing with all their injuries, they're a team that really concerns me right now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was concerned from the door. I mean, when you look at their offensive coordinator, to me, the offensive coordinator really wasn't calling the type of plays that you need for Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert, one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and his intended air yards were at the bottom of the league. I mean, we were looking at around 5.8 for intended air yards. So, I mean, it's just I felt like he didn't have a real offensive coordinator. Now you look at the injuries. You look at the injury to Bosa. You look at the injury to Herbert. And if you have a bad offensive coordinator, and then to me, Stanley, it's just, I mean, look, he's not calling those high variance plays anymore, but I don't trust this team. And, when I was looking at some of the sportsbook odds today on the Chargers to miss the playoffs, -110 to miss the playoffs. So that's telling you everything right there. And I think one of the things we have to look at is that we came into the year with the AFC West being hyped up as one of the best divisions of football. They look like one of the worst at this point.
I'm right there with you. And I mean, go figure. The class of the division right now is the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, the Broncos are sitting there at 2-1. I think we both agree the 2-1 of the Chiefs looks a little bit different than the 2-1 of the Denver Broncos, because even though they won the game on Sunday Night Football, I wasn't impressed by what I saw out of Russell Wilson. I wasn't impressed by what I saw in that offense. The defense, I think that there's a very fair case that it looks very good right now. Even in the loss that they took to the Seahawks, that was not on the defense at all, and I think that is going to be a good core unit moving forward. But I take a look at this Broncos team, and I do think that their 2-1 is a little bit fool's gold, and I think that it's just so important with a lot of these teams right now to take a look at the context of the record.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. I mean, the Broncos right now, they're struggling to move the ball. I mean, like, to me, Jimmy Garoppolo tried his hardest to lose that game for them. And, you know,
he pulled a Dan Orlovsky.
Yeah, and then he tried to throw a pick six on the same play. And I think, you know, a big part of them losing that game was the fact that Trent Williams got hurt. Because, I mean, obviously, you're going to struggle to move the ball. This is a 49ers team which already had issues at offensive line. And you got to see why the 49ers were trying to replace Jimmy Garoppolo so much.
And shout out to Dan Orlovsky for having such a good sense of humor over the Jimmy G situation over the weekend. But I'm so glad that you bring that up as well, because the most befuddling line move that I've seen out of these Week 4 games, and talked about it a little bit in the last hour, the San Francisco 49ers opened up as right around about a 1.5 point favorite against the LA Rams. This has now went to 2.5, and with the 49ers, they look terrible on Sunday Night Football. They lose Trent Williams. Now, the Rams, they've got their own injury concerns of their own, but I felt like the Rams being about a 1 to 1.5 point underdog, that was relatively correct. I would have even moved this to more of a pick'em after what we saw the previous week. I didn't anticipate this line going the other way, and it just feels a little bit confusing.
I mean, outside of the NFC Championship game, when you look at what Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan have done when they played each other, Kyle Shanahan has dominated that matchup. So, and like even in the NFC Championship game, the 49ers were up 10 with, 6, 7, 8 minutes to go before they just decided, I'm not going to go for it on 4th and 1 at the 50. I'm going to drop the interception. I'm going to allow the Rams to score a touchdown, then kick the field goal to tie the game. And it's just like, to me, the 49ers have always had their numbers. So I can see why some of the sharper players will jump on that line.
And I think that is something that's very interesting as well. How much do you take a look at the history when it comes to divisional matchups like Rams versus 49ers? Because you pointed out, the 49ers have been able to do a good job against Sean McVay, and really the only team that has owned Sean McVay since he's come into the league, because I do think that there are certain scheduling spots. I do think that there are opportunities to look past the numbers that we've seen like this year and last year and diving into the matchups, and you just pointed out one of them.
I mean, I think you have to look at it. I mean, look, I think you never want to just weigh your entire handicap on past trends, but you look at the Colts and the Jaguars. I mean, when the Colts go to Jacksonville, it's a house of horrors. Oh. I mean, even you look at tonight, the Dallas Cowboys have dominated Danny Jones throughout his entire career. So I think a lot of times, these divisional teams, they know each other pretty well. And when one team has an edge, it tends to play out over time.
Yeah, man, look at week 2, the Green Bay Packers. I mean, Aaron Rodgers jokes that he owns the Chicago Bears, but it really is true. And that has been always something to take a look at as well. And what I think is also going to be something to identify is we're talking about the AFC, and I know that off air we were having a good conversation about Lamar Jackson. Baltimore being a 3.5 point underdog in week 4 against the Buffalo Bills, to me, this just, even if you don't like the Baltimore Ravens outright, being able to get 3.5 with them in this spot, it feels like relatively good value. I'm not sure if you agree/disagree, but I take a look at this Baltimore team, and I can understand them being an underdog. This being past the line, the number of 3, though, it just feels like a good take on the Ravens.
Yeah, this is a spot that I'm looking to back as well. I love the Baltimore Ravens in this spot. I mean, I think Lamar Jackson's playing out of his mind. Obviously, the Ravens, they have some issues with their secondary, and with a team like the Buffalo Bills who can kind of light it up, that gives you some concern. But when you look at the Buffalo Bills, they dominated that matchup against the Miami Dolphins. They had the Dolphins defense on the field for 90 plays, and they still couldn't get it done. They played out in the heat. But, I mean, they're a banged-up team. A lot of their secondary is banged up. Obviously, they still don't have Tre'Davious White. And they have issues offensively and defensively as far as injuries. So I think for them to travel again on the road and have to take on Harbaugh, historically, he does well as an underdog at home. I'm looking towards the Ravens here. And I think Lamar Jackson is going to be at the forefront of the MVP race should he win this.
And this is an example of being able to take a look at like opponents, because both of these teams lost in Miami as well. And I would say Baltimore looked a little bit better than the Buffalo Bills in their loss as well. And I know that you've got a little bit of a position on Lamar Jackson, so let's talk a little bit about the MVP race on the other side with Raheem Palmer, who does great work over at the Ringer, and take a look at some more Week 4 games for this NFL slate here on the Greg Peterson Experience on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. Back here with Raheem Palmer, does a great job over at the Ringer, and I was talking about this a little bit earlier, and let's dive into it, the MVP race, because I know that you invested in Lamar Jackson coming into the season, and that's a play that I absolutely loved. I think that Lamar Jackson has done an amazing job. If I had an award for MVP right now, I would give it to Lamar Jackson, and as of right now, we're finding Lamar Jackson right around 7-1, and I'm not sure if you take a look at the current odds board with Lamar Jackson being at 7-1, tied for third with Patrick Mahomes. I still think there might be a little bit of value there.
I mean, I think there's a little bit of value, but I mean, obviously I have 20-1, so I don't want to tell people to take a worse number than me, but I just think, look, we see it in the MLB. Aaron Judge, contract year. We see it with Lamar Jackson, contract year. He bet on himself, and you kind of got to admire that, and he's been playing lights out. And, I mean, he doesn't have some of the weapons that a lot of other quarterbacks have. I mean, we look at Josh Allen. He has Stephon Diggs. I mean, guys like Bateman are good.
They got rid of Hollywood Brown.
Yeah, so I mean, you look at guys like Bateman and Duvernay, they're solid, but they're not Stephon Diggs. So I think the way Lamar Jackson's playing, he should be, honestly, he should be at the forefront.
Yep, and when it comes to Jalen Hurts, I love what he's been able to do. I think putting him number 2 on the odds board has went a little bit too far personally. I think that he should probably be a little bit behind guys like Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson's that have sort of been there, done that, and how much do you fear that perhaps there's going to be a little bit of overinflation on the Philadelphia Eagles? Because I do take a look at this line, them being a 6.5-point favorite against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and it feels relatively right in my opinion. If I had to take something right now, I'd be taking a look at Jacksonville, but I'd be rather hoping that this line gets back to 7 rather than taking a 6.5 like it's at right now, because I was sitting at 7 while I was doing the show yesterday, but I do fear that if the Philadelphia Eagles have another big week or two, it can lead to overinflation, and I think that it's very important to gauge when these hot teams just become a little bit too hot, and then you got to drop them and look at the other side.
I mean, you got the name of the game is buy low, sell high, but I think this line is this line is priced correctly. Actually, my model has it around 6. I think we're looking at 6.5, so It's a no play for me. But I mean, obviously, you did have that sharp money come in and snatch up the 7s. Me, like I said before, I think the Jaguars have been fortunate this year, so I'm gonna stay away from this one. But I mean, it's really gonna be an interesting matchup to see Doug Peterson go up against his old team.
I agree, and when it comes to the NFC East as well, we've got an inter-division battle that's going to be going down between Dallas and the Washington Commanders, and just the more I take a look at the Commanders, I did not have a high opinion of them coming into the season, and, well, it's not any higher after what we saw last week as the Cowboys, they are a 3-point favorite, and this is a line that seems right to me, because with Dallas, they've been fighting hard with Cooper Rush in the fold. This is a defense that is very solid, obviously a little bit of a work in progress when it comes to this offense, but I do think that Dallas can actually help themselves out a little bit more if we see a little bit more of what we saw in the second half of the Monday Night Football game, because Tony Pollard was getting more touches, it felt. And it felt like good things happened for Dallas, and I think that that's something that's worth watching in this game. I'm not sure if you've got any position in terms of Washington versus Dallas, but I'm just completely out on Washington for Dallas. I'm sort of lukewarm on them, hoping to see a little bit more out of Pollard.
I think the issue with Washington is they just can't block for Carson Wentz. And I think we saw that in the game against the Philadelphia Eagles. And, I mean, look, that first half against the Detroit Lions, I mean, that said a lot about who this Washington team is. I mean, look, the Lions have given up points to everybody. And for an entire half, they couldn't score. And, defensively, I mean, I know they don't have guys like Chase Young back, but they're very disappointing. So, to me, from what I saw tonight, I have to upgrade the Dallas defense. I think Micah Parsons, I think DeMarcus Lawrence, I think they're going to be able to rush the passer and cause some real problems for Carson Wentz. I don't have a position on it yet, but I think Ron Rivera is going to be on the hot seat pretty soon.
Yep, and when it comes to the Cowboys, in some spots you're finding the juice more around even money / -105 on a 3. This was at 2.5 a little bit earlier. Trust me, if we see any more 2.5s and that's what we get on game day, I would certainly be willing to take a shot there. And then with regards to the biggest line move that we've seen this week, that is the Arizona Cardinals and the Carolina Panthers. They also are able to throw in their Packers versus the Patriots. But a look at line on this one was the Cardinals being right around about a 3-point favorite. Now it's come back to the Carolina Panthers being a very slight favorite between 1.5 and 2. And I do think that this is such an interesting game because with the Arizona Cardinals, they've been one of the biggest disappointments in all of football. But what I think with the Arizona Cardinals is this team is just so much different with DeAndre Hopkins. And I felt like we knew that coming into the year, but I think that it's just been magnified more and more by what we've seen this year.
Oh, yeah, I mean, without a doubt. But I also think, when we look at this Arizona Cardinals team, they have played a tougher schedule. I mean, they played the Kansas City Chiefs to open up the year. They played the Rams. So to me, this is a step down in competition. Like, I actually think the Raiders are probably a better team than the Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers, they were home dogs, and they were basically playing a Saints team with Jameis Winston, who has, fractures in his back, and they're dealing with a lot of injuries and a new coach. So to me, I think this is probably a good spot to buy low in the Arizona Cardinals. I think this is a really great teaser leg to tease the Arizona Cardinals through the key numbers of 3 and 7 because I don't like what I see from Baker. I think, my colleague Benjamin Solak, he actually did something on the Carolina Panthers. So it's just I'm not high on this team at all. So this is the week to sell them.
Yep, I backed the Carolina Panthers last week just because I couldn't bet on a quarterback with a bad back. And if there's a team that I've downgraded more than darn near any other this season, it is the New Orleans Saints. And as they go to Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, they're a 2.5-point underdog against the Minnesota Vikings. So this is going to be our game across the pond this week. And you were mentioning teaser legs and being able to go through the 3 and the 7. Would you perhaps be willing to do it with the Saints in a game that I think might be a little bit lower scoring with a total of 43.5?
I mean, it does look interesting. I think if Jameis is healthy and, you still have some guys healthy for that team, I do think they're being a little bit undervalued. But right now, it's like there's so much uncertainty around the injury report over there. So I want to wait on that one.
Yep, I don't blame you there. And I think that the toughest part might be finding a little bit of a dance partner to be able to have the teaser because a lot of the other games that we're finding in that neighborhood of about a 2.5, that would be the Rams against the San Francisco 49ers, which the Rams, I think that they've got a good shot of being able to pull that off outright. So that would probably be the one that if I was looking to take a teaser in the circumstance that you threw out, I'd probably be looking at the Rams first and foremost. But this Chiefs versus Buccaneers game is also on 2.5. I just think that there's blowout potential here with the Chiefs being a favorite coming off of a loss. I think that they are going to be very, very angry. Tom Brady, he's still at the helm of the Buccaneers, but what is going to be around him? Because it looks like Mike Evans should be good to go, but even with him back in the fold, you can tell that he just didn't have any weapons around him last week against the Packers.
I mean, when I looked at that game, to me, I felt like that was a very winnable game for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They were the unfortunate victim of some turnover.
Those two fumbles were killer.
Yeah, I think if they don't fumble those two, I think they win that game. And to me, it says a lot about this Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. I mean, look, they've been dominating and shutting everybody down. So I think what you're seeing is that you're seeing a team that's very similar to the Peyton Manning-led Broncos the last year before he retired when they won the Super Bowl. I think this defense can kind of carry them. And you're seeing all throughout the NFL, offenses are struggling. So if you have a good defense, I mean, the sky's the limit. But one thing I want to say about that game and the Carolina game, I mean, there's talk of a hurricane, so we actually don't know if those games are actually going to take place at those home venues. So you want to take a position on that. You kind of gotta do your research.
Yep, absolutely, and I do think that is such an important note because we see it happen like once every few years where you have that sort of an ordeal. I remember last year, the Green Bay Packers, they had to play at Miami against the New Orleans Saints due to something very similar. So I'm so glad that you pointed that out. And do you think that maybe people are a little bit too low on Tom Brady right now? Speaking of the Buccaneers, because I watched that game on Sunday and it felt like Tom Brady honestly did an okay job. He took what the defense gave him. That was not necessarily a whole heck of a lot. And the weapons around him were subpar, and yet he was still able to complete over 66% of his passes. And in my opinion, he still looked relatively sharp.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not that low on Tom Brady. I mean, I'm a Tom Brady guy. It's like, I always tell people, like, Tom Brady and Peyton Manning's like Pepsi and Coke, and you had to pick one or the other. I was a Thomas guy. So, to me, I just think they had some turnover variance luck that just didn't go their way, and I think it changed the course of that game. And then the Packers, I mean, a lot of people projected them as a top-tier defense. So, I think that's what you got in that game where, most of the receivers were in the hospital, and then obviously Mike Evans was suspended.
Yep, and by the way, for that Packers versus Patriots total, currently at a 40 to a 40.5. That's something that I never thought I would see in a game in which Aaron Rodgers was under center for the Packers. So it shall be interesting to see what we get this week in the NFL. And I know that, Raheem, you do a great job of covering it all. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure.
Raheem Palmer of The Ringer does amazing work, and it's always great to have him on this show.